It was a stormy evening when Natalie first arrived at Maplewood Heights, a 6-story apartment building that had seen better days. The peeling paint, dimly lit hallways, and creaking elevator all spoke of a place once grand, but now forgotten. Natalie had been searching for an affordable apartment in the city, and apartment 13 on the 3rd floor fit her budget perfectly. It was small but cozy, with a view of the city skyline. The landlord, Mr. Grayson, had seemed eager to rent it out, offering a discount if she signed the lease immediately. "Why is it so cheap?" Natalie had asked, narrowing her eyes. Mr. Grayson hesitated, his smile faltering. "Well, some tenants say strange things happen in apartment 13. Superstitions, you know. But it's nonsense." Desperate to move out of her cramped roommate situation, Natalie brushed off his vague explanation. Ghost stories didn't scare her. She was a pragmatist, a journalism graduate, with a firm belief in facts over fiction. The first night in her new apartment was uneventful, save for the occasional groan of the old pipes. Natalie unpacked her belongings, humming to herself, and went to bed early. The storm outside raged on, the wind howling through the cracks in the old windows. Just as she began to drift off, a faint sound caught her attention. It was the sound of faint footsteps coming from above her. "Probably just a neighbor," she muttered, pulling the blanket over her head. But the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, as if pacing back and forth. When she checked the time, 3:13 a.m., a chill ran down her spine. She remembered Mr. Grayson's hesitant words about the apartment. The next morning, Natalie asked around. The building's residents were friendly, but evasive when she mentioned apartment 13. An elderly woman named Mrs. Caldwell, who lived down the hall, gave her a knowing look. "That apartment has been empty for years," Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice low. "Tenants come and go. They never stay long." "Why not?" Natalie asked. The old woman leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They say it's haunted. A young woman died there years ago, fell from the balcony. They never figured out if it was an accident or something worse." Natalie laughed nervously. "Ghost stories, right?" Mrs. Caldwell didn't laugh. "Just be careful, dear." Over the next few days, Natalie tried to ignore the odd occurrences. Lights flickered unpredictably. Her cat, Luna, hissed at empty corners. And every night, without fail, the pacing footsteps above her would begin at exactly 3:13 a.m. One night, determined to prove to herself that it was just a neighbor, Natalie ventured upstairs. She knocked on the door of the apartment directly above hers, but no one answered. The door was slightly ajar, creaking open as she pushed it. Inside, the apartment was empty. Dust covered every surface, and the air was heavy with disuse. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as though someone was watching her. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from behind her. Whirling around, she saw nothing but the door had slammed shut. Natalie began researching the history of Maplewood Heights. She found old newspaper clippings about a woman named Evelyn Harper, who had lived in apartment 13 in the 1970s. Evelyn was a recluse, rarely seen by her neighbors, until one day she was found dead on the pavement beneath her balcony. The police had ruled it a suicide, but rumors of foul play persisted. The more Natalie learned, the more the strange happenings escalated. Objects in her apartment moved on their own. Her reflection in the mirror seemed off, lingering for a split second after she turned away. One night, she woke to find the words, "Help me," scrawled in condensation on her bathroom mirror. She was certain she hadn't written it. Desperate for answers, Natalie reached out to a local paranormal investigator, Marcus Ridd. Skeptical but intrigued, he agreed to visit her apartment. The investigation took place on a cold Saturday night. Marcus set up cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recorders. Natalie watched nervously as he walked through the apartment, muttering observations. "There's definitely a presence here," he said. "It's strong." At 3:13 a.m., the activity reached its peak. The temperature in the room plummeted, and an oppressive silence filled the air. Suddenly, the footsteps started again, but this time, they weren't just above her. They echoed all around the apartment. A voice, faint and mournful, whispered from the shadows. "Help me." Marcus froze, his equipment spiking. "Evelyn?" he called out. "What do you want?" The voice grew louder, more desperate. "Help me!" A shadowy figure materialized in the corner of the room, a woman with hollow eyes and a face twisted in anguish. Natalie felt a surge of courage. "Evelyn, we're here to help. Tell us what happened to you." The apparition pointed toward the balcony. Marcus and Natalie followed, braving the cold night air. On the balcony railing, they found scratches, as if someone had desperately tried to hold on before falling. Beneath the scratches was a name, Daniel. Through further investigation, they discovered that Daniel was Evelyn's fiancé. He had vanished shortly after her death, leaving many to suspect his involvement. Natalie and Marcus dug into old police records and uncovered a letter from Evelyn, hidden in the archives. In it, she wrote about her fear of Daniel and his violent tendencies. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus performed a cleansing ritual, assuring Evelyn that her story would be told, that justice would be sought. As the ritual concluded, the oppressive atmosphere in the apartment lifted. For the first time in weeks, Natalie felt at peace. The next morning, she awoke to find a final message on her mirror. "Thank you." Natalie moved out of apartment 13 soon after, but she never forgot Evelyn Harper. She wrote an article about the haunting, shining a light on the forgotten tragedy of the woman in apartment 13. And though she left Maplewood Heights behind, she sometimes wondered if Evelyn had truly found peace or if her spirit still lingered, watching over the place she once called home.